Today, we answer this important question. How did this become this? How did this become this? And how did this become this? Most importantly, how did the Super Mario Brothers movie become such a disaster? The answer to these questions starts with movie development. Obviously, it takes a ton of work and years to get an idea onto the big screen, but for a property as hot as Nintendo, everybody wanted it. Starting in the mid to late 1980s, there were efforts by filmmakers to obtain the license to the Mario franchise in order to turn it into a movie. Nintendo was offered upwards of $10 million by major studios. Now, this obviously makes sense. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Mario's dominance of the video game industry and pop culture in general was unquestioned. By 1990, 24 million Nintendo units had been sold in the United States, and virtually every one of these systems had at least one copy of a Mario game. Revenue for the Nintendo reached $2 billion that year. A new system, the Super Nintendo, was released in Japan and South Korea, with a release throughout the rest of the world coming over the next 2 years. Nintendo's dominance of the video game industry was unmatched. Nintendo was not new to taking Mario to other media properties. The 1989 Super Mario Bros. Show was one of the first Nintendo based shows. Produced by Dick Entertainment, the show was a hit, and Nintendo ran with the success of the program, giving Dick a license to make a movie based off of the show. That movie was never made. Others, including Dustin Hoffman, attempted to get the license to the game. In Hoffman's version, he would play Mario with Danny DeVito as Luigi, which seems strange. I feel like they should be reversed. Roland Jaffe, a film producer who ran Leitmotiv Studios, was able to get the movie rights from Nintendo. Jaffe partnered with producer Jake Eberts. The men impressed Nintendo with their pitch, which was darker and more adult themed than what Nintendo necessarily would have created for a video game. This was by design for Nintendo, who wanted to try to use a movie to expand Mario's audience. This was also in line with the experience of the producers, who had worked on movies like The Killing Fields, a 1984 movie about Cambodia's dictator Pol Pot and the genocide in that country, which killed 2 million people. This is obviously a movie that sounds incredibly meaningful and impactful, but I'm not quite sure it was the best experience for a film about a children's game. The fact that Nintendo opted for a smaller studio rather than a larger, more established brand was a choice. Eberts and Yaffe offered Nintendo more creative control, but Nintendo explicitly declined control over the movie, not understanding how the movie industry worked and how to maximize the potential of said movie. As such, they gave Yaffe and Eberts the ability to experiment with the property. The reduced fee also helped sweeten the deal. So did the fact that Yaffe and Eberts allowed Nintendo to maintain merchandising rights. As always for Nintendo, it's all about the merch. The real trouble began with the script. The first draft was written by Oscar winner Barry Morrow, who had Mario and Luigi on a road trip that followed many of the elements of the Rain Man. The movie was so similar to the Rain Man that it was derisively referred to some as the Drain Man. The idea was something, but not what anyone was looking for, as it lacked charm and humor. Screenwriters Jim Genuine and Tom Parker were brought on board to change the script. They created a plot that satirized traditional fairy tales and enhanced the focus on the relationship between Mario and Luigi. This was better, but not quite there, so we go to round 3 of the script, this version by Parker Bennett and Terry Runty. Their job was to incorporate new elements, including a dark version of New York and a parallel dino world known as Dino Hatton. As such, Parker and Runty sought to balance the darker elements and lighter elements of the film. But this version was too funny, so let's get 2 more writers, Dick Clement and Ian LaFernace, whose job was to make the film more adult. Okay, fine. Got it, but nope, not really. As the film entered pre production, Yaffe and Eberts became worried that the film was now too adult and had moved away from the core audience of teens and young adults. That fear was amplified by Disney, who had purchased distribution rights through their Buena Vista Pictures subsidiary. The Mickey Mouse Empire wanted something more targeted to younger audiences. So, let's doctor the script again. Ed Solomon and Ryan Rowe were brought in, once again increasing the amount of writers who had worked on the script. Except another problem. After multiple directors had passed or were dropped from the project, Yaffe and Eberts had hired the husband and wife directing team of Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel. The two had previously worked on sci-fi classic Max Headroom, in addition to music videos and commercials. Producers liked their offbeat vibe and felt that the experience that Morton and Jankel brought to the project would work well. Morton and Jankel wanted to make the film darker. The script they wanted to use was more adult and pulled inspiration from movies like Blade Runner and Batman. A draft of the script, produced by Bennett and Runty, one that merged themes of space operas and used prophecies as devices, was created, and everyone seemed to like that version. But this script was too kid friendly and funny. Dick Clement and Ian LaFrancis were brought on to write a script that was more feminist, adult oriented, and violent, like Die Hard. It even featured a cameo from Bruce Willis, a la Die Hard. That version had to be rewritten to make it less violent. Okay, fine. Oh, stop me if you heard this one before. This script was too far away from young adults and families. So, without alerting the directors, producers created a new script. This one by Ed Solomon and Ryan Rowe. This version was more family friendly and had less special effects. Morton and Jankel found that the script had been changed to be more kid friendly when they arrived on the set with the rest of the cast. They also realized very quickly that the new version had been written without any thought for set design, props, actors, and overall direction. When the directors called the writers to figure out what was going on, producers banned them from talking to the writers again in the future. Not great. The directing duo was so upset by the changes that they considered leaving the film entirely, but ultimately decided that they were the only ones who could handle this version of the movie and that they could bring the more family friendly script closer to their darker vision. Of course, they were also directing under the gun. As noted by Morton, Nintendo put, quote, a crushing deadline on the project. The movie had to be made by a certain date, otherwise, there were all of these financial penalties, which added a lot of extra stress to the project, end quote. So, you've got producers versus directors as filming is about to start. More script doctors, back to Bennett and Runty, who had already created one version of the script, were flown down to North Carolina to fix the script on the fly while filming was taking place, and do so in a way that would keep the peace on the set. Also left in the dark about the new changes was the cast. British actor Bob Hoskins was brought in as Mario, with Dennis Hopper as Bowser. John Leguizamo, then more known as a comic than an actor, won the part of Luigi. Samantha Mathis was brought on as Princess Daisy. The cast was good, but they had not been told of the script changes. Now, in most cases, none of these actors were the first choice. Dustin Hoffman wanted to play Mario, but Minoru Arakawa of Nintendo didn't think he was right for the project. Danny DeVito was offered the role of Mario, but turned it down. There's a story that says Tom Hanks, yes, Tom Hanks, was brought on as Mario or Luigi. He was ultimately dropped from the film due to either concerns about the amount of money he was asking for or his ability to handle a dramatic role. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Michael Keaton, yes, Batman himself, were both offered the roles of Koopa, but declined. In the end, the plot was a mishmash of multiple different scripts, featuring Mario and Luigi traveling through an interdimensional portal to Dino Hatton, that's Manhattan, but with dinosaurs, to rescue Mario's girlfriend Daniela and Daisy, an archaeology student. Daisy is also a princess in the dinosaur world, there are guns that devolve people, and of course, Bowser and his henchmen, including Izzy and Spike, as well as Goombas, which were pure nightmare fuel. Honestly, don't worry about the plot. Not important. Filming ran from early May through late July 1990 using Carlaco Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina. An abandoned cement factory was repurposed and turned into a 6-story set. Morton, Jankel, and the rest of the crew created a cyberpunk world, which they referred to as being in a new brutalism style. Cars had sparks, there were advertisements for strippers for some reason, and other darker art elements. The goal of the directors was to create a movie that parents could enjoy, while the producers wanted a movie that kept the kids who played the game at the forefront. This resulted in continued rewrites and script changes, including script rewrites that kept happening on a daily basis, even after the shooting began, resulting in color coded scripts that were distributed to the cast and crew at the last possible moment. This caused some actors to honestly give up. Said Dennis Hopper, quote, the script had probably been rewritten 5 or 6 times by the time I arrived there. I don't really bother with it anymore. I just go in and do it scene by scene. I figure it's not going to hurt my character. End quote. Hopper referred to the film as a nightmare, saying he was only supposed to film for 5 weeks, but wound up filming for 17. In a story recounted in 2008, Hopper said that he was talking to his then 6-year-old son about the movie, who asked why he played King Koopa. Hopper said, quote, well, Henry, I did it so that you could have shoes. His son apparently responded, quote, Dad, I don't need shoes that badly, end quote. Hoskins and Leguizamo both knew that the film was going to be a disaster, so they would do shots before and during filming. That may have resulted in broken fingers. During one scene, a drunk Leguizamo was driving a van, but braked too hard, causing the van door to close on Hoskins' fingers, and resulting in a broken finger for Hoskins. Due to this, you can actually see Hoskins wearing a cast in some scenes. Hoskins would say that he was stabbed 4 times, almost electrocuted, and almost drowned on the set. Actress Fiona Shaw, who plays Bowser's henchwoman Lena, takes a shot at one point in the movie. The shot contains a worm, and no, that's not a prop, and no, No one told Shaw. Filming wasn't fun. Hoskins called it, quote, a fucking nightmare. Hopper said, quote, it was a nightmare, very honestly, that movie. It was a husband and wife directing team who were both control freaks and wouldn't talk before they made decisions, end quote. Problems with Morton and Jankel were present throughout the movie. Hoskins nicknamed the two, quote, the cunt and the cow, end quote, and had t-shirts made with that name. Frustrated with the constant rewrites for his script, Hoskins also stopped trying to learn his lines. At one point, when presented with a rewrite, Dennis Hopper threw a 3-hour tantrum, causing the film to lose half a day of shooting. Leguizamo said that Morton poured hot coffee on an extra's head because he didn't think the extra's costume was dirty enough. The two directors were known for micromanaging and got so into the weeds that they started instructing the director of photography on camera aperture settings. I don't know anything about film, so I don't know if that's a bad thing, but it did cause the director of photography, Dean Semler, to question why he was employed. Even more serious is that the two directors were accused of not communicating major film or script changes with others on the crew or even with each other. All of this meant that the budget of the film ballooned and principal photography, which was only supposed to be 10 weeks, expanded to 15. A massive fight scene involving the Brooklyn Bridge was created to end the movie, but that was cut as producers began to get tired of spending money and didn't think that the directors could pull it off. Things didn't get better during post-production. A Los Angeles Times story by Richard Statton, written before post-production even began, chronicled the various disasters of the film and got many actors to go on record. Angered by their conduct and the way the film was going, the producers apparently tried to remove Morton and Jankel from the film entirely. Reshoots were added without the director's knowledge and shot with other second unit directors. Morton would be locked out of the editing room, and I mean physically locked out of the editing room, and had to appeal to the directors union in order to get back in. The one good thing about the movie was the special effects. Dinosaurs were designed to look more cartoon-like than realistic, a nod to the fact that Jurassic Park, in production at the same time, was obviously going to out-realism any Mario dinosaur. Yoshi made an appearance in the movie. 4 separate Yoshi puppets were used in the movie. The largest Yoshi puppet had 200 feet of cable inside of it. It required 9 people to make as many as 64 different movements. The visual effects for the movie were created using a variety of revolutionary film techniques, including new software and a Kodak film scanner. This marked the first time that Kodak had ever used their software for a film like this. In total, the film contains over 700 unique visual effects. The special effects were so good that they actually earned the movie an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. That award was ultimately won by The Nightmare Before Christmas. After overshoots, director conflicts, and more broken bones than there really should have been, the movie opened in the United States in time for its Nintendo-imposed deadline, premiering on May 28, 1993. It opened fourth and went downhill from there. From a critical perspective, the movie was a disaster, earning a 29% positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Frank Ochnig of Movie Eye said the movie was, quote, about as playful and challenging as an unplugged pinball machine, end quote. Greg Moskowitz of eFilmCritic.com called the movie, quote, an early example of why video games don't make good movies, end quote. Stephen Garrett of Time Out said that the movie, quote, will baffle kids, bore adolescents, and depress adults, end quote. Now, I do want to note that the criticism of the film was largely based around its execution, plot, writing, and directing. One of the chief complaints was how the film wildly veered from the source material. However, other aspects of the film were praised. Michael Wilmington of the Los Angeles Times called the movie wildly accomplished when discussing its production design and special effects. Performances of the actors, in particular Hoskins, Leguizamo, and Hopper, was generally praised. For example, Janet Maslin of the New York Times said that Hoskins could, quote, handle any role with grace and good humor, end quote. Financially, the film was also a flop. On a budget of $48 million, it made $39 million at the box office. It likely turned a profit in post-release sales, scoring releases on Laserdisc, VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. As best I can tell, the movie is not currently available on a streaming service, although you can easily buy any physical copy. The movie's failure also spooked Nintendo, who quickly and understandably decided there would be no more creative experimentation with their intellectual properties. There would not be another Mario movie for 30 years when the animated Super Mario Bros. Movie hit theaters in 2023. Unlike its predecessor, this movie was a massive hit, generating more than $1.3 billion at the box office on a $100 million budget. While the movie has since achieved somewhat of a cult following, it was a major bomb. It missed the mark wildly, excluding all the joy and lightness you see in any of the original games. These games are bright, colorful, hopeful affairs. They should not have had strippers and cyberpunk undertones. That being said, I have to admit, it's easy to criticize. The producers and directors wanted to try something new, and Nintendo, to their infinite credit, gave them the opportunity to do so. Everyone missed the mark, and that's a shame. Fortunately, 30 years later, they would correct this error. And that is it for this much requested version of Almost Something, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do like or subscribe, and let us know your thoughts on what video should come next in the comments below. You can also click on the next video that the almighty YouTube algorithm has recommended for you. Thank you so much for watching, my friends, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I like making it. Take care, everybody.